Good evening and welcome to Scotland at 7 here on Broadcasting Scotland. My name's Kenny McBride and I'm joined tonight by our guests Effie Samara.
Hello.
And by Chris McCusker, who tonight is sitting on
Ken.
my right, on your left. So,
always on the left, comrades.
But anyway, our first story tonight is on coronavirus. And as of 2 p.m. today in Scotland, a total of 2,234 coronavirus tests have been concluded. Of these, 2,207 tests were confirmed negative and 27 tests were positive. As of 9 a.m. this morning, 26,261 people have been tested in the UK, of which 25,888 were confirmed negative and 373 were confirmed as positive. 6 patients who tested positive have died. The global death toll has passed 4,000 and infections are at over 114,000. The start of the UK peak of the coronavirus epidemic is expected within the next fortnight, England's Deputy Chief Medical Officer has said. Dr. Jenny Harries defended the government's decision to delay closing schools and the introduction of other stringent tactics, saying experts are assessing new cases on an hourly basis to achieve a balanced response. And now, Chris, first of all, we were just discussing before we came on air, as our resident aviation correspondent, there have been a number of airlines have taken fairly major action.
Quite a few of the main carriers have scaled back their operations and will revisit it in April. Worth noting the fact that Italy has got no flights in and no flights out.
Yeah. A friend of my sister's has just had to cancel his wedding in Italy. I mean, really disappointing, but probably for the best. And this, we've seen a couple of things. We've seen people suggesting that why are we, thinking that we should take a lead from somewhere like Italy for our preparedness. But it does seem like Italy has seen the worst of this and has taken the strongest action it can.
Also, let's not forget that Italy have double the number of ICU beds available to what the UK has, according to one of a medical expert this morning on the BBC, who is a doctor. So perhaps there might be a case there for slightly augmenting the speed and trying to slow this down. But I think we've got to be careful to have a balanced view, take a balanced view between panic and prevention. It's easy to get into the spirit of it, but also at this moment, it might be great to think about, the experts who are really very precious in this, because Nigel Farage and people like that are not going to be able to give us a view on this. I have little to add. I'm not medical, other than to say, I think the Scottish government are very much on top of this. They're not going to let an opportunity they're not going to miss. We don't have that many in Scotland, so this is brilliant. It's only 27, I think, as of this afternoon. So not a great, but it hasn't peaked yet, so we don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, it does seem to be that we are still in the containment phase of this. We're not at the point where we're trying to just reduce the number of cases. We think that there is still a possibility we can stop this becoming an epidemic in Scotland. So.
I'm sorry, I'm just trying to stop laughing because Effie put Nigel Farage and expert in the same sentence.
Yeah, well, I mean, Newsnight thought that he was a worthy guest to talk about it. So,
I'm so
honestly,
sorry.
the BBC are just scraping the barrel. I mean, what significance has he got? Absolutely none whatsoever.
Yeah, he's not even an elected politician anymore. He's
exactly
leader of a party that has no purpose anymore.
Who I heard this earlier on this week was thinking about starting another bloody party.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I mean, who knows? He might side up with Tommy Robertson and stuff like that. And all the
I
rest
heard
of
that
it.
Tommy's staying in Russia. He was in Moscow last week. I think he's thinking about actually becoming a permanent resident.
Well, that would be a tragic loss for us.
Certainly it would be.
We're talking about suspending flights to keep coronavirus out. I think we could suspend flights to Moscow if it keeps Tommy Robinson out.
Wow, you know what? That would not be a bad idea.
But we will obviously keep you up to date. In the meantime, if you have any concerns, you can contact NHS 24 on 111. If you're showing symptoms, NHS Inform has all the latest information. And if you're thinking of travelling, then Fit to Travel, the Fit to Travel website has all the information you need there as well. So just look out for these things. If you are planning to travel, obviously, as Chris says, some of the airlines have changed the frequency of their flights, where they're going in some cases. So just keep an eye out for that, and hopefully we can try and contain this as best we can. Just keep washing your hands, try not to touch your face too much. All the advice that we've been giving you.
No handshakes, apparently.
Apparently not.
Fist bumps.
That's right.
I was thinking we should do the Vulcan sign, and that works as too. But anyway, moving on. Scotland will work with all parties to deliver a successful COP26 in Glasgow, Climate Change Secretary Rosanna Cunningham has said. Updating Parliament today, she said that COP26 offered a unique opportunity for Scotland to put progress towards decarbonisation at the forefront of people's thinking. This follows the recent budget, which committed an extra £500 million to low-carbon transitioning and more funding than ever before for climate action. As discussions over the use of the Glasgow Science Centre with the UK Government continue, Ms Cunningham called on them to work constructively to find a mutually beneficial solution. She said, COP26 will be a critical moment in the global fight against climate change. It must set the world on course to net zero within a generation. In recent weeks, significant progress has been made towards agreement of a shared space. However, at the end of last week, it became clear that sharing the Glasgow Science Centre is no longer an option for the UK Government, placing the centre in a difficult position. We have no desire for uncertainty to continue, as we have always been clear that COP26 should transcend politics. In the spirit of partnership, I have written to the COP26 President to offer transfer of control of the Science Centre to the UK Government, on the provision that we are offered an appropriate alternative venue. I therefore urge the UK Government to conclude this matter without delay to ensure we have a platform to pursue increased global action. We want to use COP26 as a catalyst to attract new investment, innovation and sustainable growth for Scotland that will firmly position Scotland as a world leader in tackling climate change. And this is an ongoing problem that we've had with the Scottish Government and UK Government not being able to see eye to eye on how to manage COP26. The Scottish Government clearly is leading the way in several ways on a global level, and we've talked about this before as well, on climate change, but it does seem that the British Government is being is trying to play politics a wee bit, trying not to let Scotland have too much of a chance to shine.
Yeah, and it's a clear exercise to keep us down, know your place. This is a UK COP26, it's not a Scottish COP26. And interestingly as well, I wonder if Nicola's actually bought a ticket from Eventbrite, as I suggested a couple of weeks ago, because we still haven't heard if she's going to be attending it or not. Boris.
Well, we know what Boris said. I don't want to see that woman there. Yes, that's right.
He said he doesn't want to see her there and all of this. But that, to me, that's just posturing and you know, and it's jockeying for position and all the rest of it. But they have to be a bit pliable. Do you know what I mean? Because it is in Glasgow, you know, and it's Glasgow District Council that, you know, help run these facilities. So, you know, there has to be a bit of come and go.
Yeah. And this is something that we've seen from countries all over the world, governments all over the world, playing politics with climate change.
Of course.
What can we do to try and kind of make them see that this is not a political game? This is something that it doesn't matter what the politics are. We have to work together.
We have,
on this.
but you see, to them, it is a political game. And the thing is, you know, you've got the arguments polarized at the moment. So you've got the right wing governments taking a position very much the same as the coronavirus and other illnesses, so that it's somehow going to sort itself out, and putting the economic argument before the health argument or the well-being argument. So that's across the board, and you have every single government, obviously with Trump as always leading the way and stuff like that, pretending that I've got the cure, it's going to be fine, the markets are doing great. This is not an argument about the markets. Climate is not an argument about politics, and it shouldn't be. It's about ourselves, it's about our kids, it's about the air that we breathe. And Scotland, as you said, has been leading the way and is still very much on renewables. And I know from personal experience Nicola Sturgeon's very personal commitment to the idea of renewables, and the vast amount of support that Scotland has received from the European Union to develop renewables. So that's the way to go. And a bit of Mr. De Pfeffel's posturing, never quite misses that. I mean, it was quite something when he, I'm not quite sure whether he knew the cameras were on him when he was talking about it, and he said, I don't want to see that woman. But that's exactly what they're trying to do. Again, they're trying to politicize the argument, which is not a political argument. This is very much about our health and about whether we have a future on this planet.
Yeah. It's very unfortunate, but hopefully some resolution can come of this. Hopefully the adults in the room, presumably mostly the ones from the Scottish Government, can help achieve something. I think it's particularly interesting, we talked about this as well when Boris Johnson had his reshuffle a while ago. They put the business minister in charge of COP26 rather than having the environment secretary taking it on. What do you think the chances are of the British government kind of seeing the light on these subjects?
I'm sorry, Kenny. They are not going to see the light on it. We've had many a discussion about the fact that Boris is just a mini-me of Trump, and that would. Putting the economy before all else is at the top of the Tory mantra.
Yeah,
and
it's kind of a similar thing with coronavirus, I think, where they've said they're not wanting to take drastic action that might spook the markets, that might hurt the economy.
Well, they've already seen the markets being spooked. There's what was it? Something like a £30 reduction in price of the barrel of oil, the Arab Emirates and stuff like that are
slightly
trading differently. They're
trading
differently
in the stock market as well.
Yeah, well, the Dow Jones in America took a hit, and it's only a matter of time before the FTSE 100 maybe takes a hit as well. And normally I always remember my father when things like this came out, because he always said to me that if you look at petrol forecourt prices and the prices go down, you know that something's afoot.
Yeah.
And I've noticed that petrol prices are coming down a bit. Some of the supermarkets, which is not the best grade of petrol, to be fair, but some of the supermarkets are selling at $1.15.
Yeah,
they are actually.
And that's not happened for the last 10 years. Whilst we were going through austerity. So I think it's wise to pay heed to that,
but the environment still has to become before those economic concerns.
Well, of course it is, yeah. But I don't personally think that the UK government is fully on board, running the same race as the Scottish government. I think the Scottish government
this is a completely different race. Yeah.
Furlongs ahead.
Oh, completely. And just adding to what Chris just mentioned about what we was talking about, the argument between well-being and economics. There's been a lot of talk about who the coronavirus is going to hit the West. And we tend to say, and we've seen it written in newspapers as well, let's not worry about it. It's a different group of people. Mm-hmm. Now, I take offense to that because my dad is within that group of people. There are people, younger people, who have lung concerns, who have heart concerns, who have blood pressure concerns. So talking about people as if they were disposable, as if we are all split into different groups, and some groups are just a bit more disposable than others. And how do you determine that disposability? It's on the basis, I'm going to say, of a eugenicist, survival of the fittest economic argument going back to Priti Patel, who said idlers, economically inactive people.
Yeah.
Those economically inactive people are our grandparents, the people who look after our children, the people who brought us into this world. So how can you just talk about them? And there's been a little bit of that kind of, conspiracy talk, or are they letting, especially after what Boris had to say on this morning, was it this morning? I don't know, I don't follow this program. GMTV or whatever it was, about, let's take it on the chin.
Yeah.
Now, if you have a high blood pressure, you're not going to take it on the chin, because what it creates for the lungs is going to kill you. I'm wondering, is this also leading back to the ideology of survival of the fittest?
Yeah.
Because let's not forget, there are people there who weren't there 5 or 10 years or 15 years ago, people like Cummings, people like that, who have got these very strange ideas. So we've got to be careful when we split the population like that and decide, it doesn't matter, it's only going to be the concern of those people. Who are these people?
Yeah.
And do we care? Should we care?
Yeah.
And the Scottish Government does.
Yeah, there's sometimes a thought there. I think that people like Boris Johnson and the social circle that he moves in are not going to be affected in a great deal by a virus, because they can protect themselves. They're not going to be protected. They're not going to have a huge problem.
Although he might have a little bit of high blood pressure. He looks like he does. I don't know, but
and with the environment, climate change, they're going to be able to afford to survive.
Who first used these tactics?
Who's that, Chris?
Let's cast our minds back to 1940s Germany.
Okay,
the eugenicist view was German, absolutely.
We shall move on there. That's probably not a road we need to go down right now. But moving on, the SNP has called on the UK government to use the budget to deliver a major boost to incomes, warning that millions of families have suffered a Tory decade of decline in living standards as a result of austerity cuts and Brexit. SNP Shadow Chancellor Alison Thewlis MP said the Tory record on living standards was a miserable failure, with soaring poverty and inequality, stagnant wages, deep cuts to social security and increased living costs, leaving many families struggling to get by. The MP for Glasgow Central has urged the Chancellor to end Tory austerity and implement the SNP's 6-point plan to put cash in people's pockets. Firstly, match the SNP government's Scottish child payment of £10 per week per eligible child for families across the UK, lifting thousands of kids out of poverty. Introduce the real living wage, boosting wages for the lowest paid and abolishing discriminatory minimum wage rates for younger people. Halt the rollout of universal credit until fundamental flaws are fixed, increasing the monthly allowance and scrapping the 2-child cap and rape clause. Reverse the cuts to social security, ending the benefit cap and introducing above-inflation increases to benefits to restore the lost value from the 4-year freeze. And reverse the cuts to housing support, abolishing the bedroom tax and reversing cuts to housing benefit and council tax reductions. And boost support for pensioners, maximising uptake of pension credit, delivering justice for the WASPy women, and covering the cost of free TV licences for the over 75. The Institute for Fiscal Studies analysis shows that the poorest 10% of households have lost an average of 11% of their income, or £1,200 per year, since 2010, as a result of Tory tax and benefit changes, while those with children have lost an average of 20%, or £4,000 per year. And this is, something that we have been talking about, as Alison Thewlis said, for a decade now, this problem of Tory austerity hitting the poorest people the hardest.
I mean, take your pick. This is a lamentable list of what they've been up to for the last 10 years. And again, it's very much ideologically inflected. Let's not worry about them. They're economically inactive. They're idlers. Poor people, we don't need them. So let's just segregate them and put them to one side. It's a horrific litany of what's been happening, but luckily we are able to mitigate it here. What people need to know is that the Scottish Government has no powers to borrow money. So what can be done is literally, what can be done within the powers of the Scottish Finance Ministry, which are limited. It is not a devolved issue. the UK is able to borrow, and the UK, all of this, what you've just read, is a choice. This has been a choice over the last 10 years of the Tory government to implement these measures. And let's not forget the tax relief that the highest groups have always received, which is actually also happening in America. Now, that was a choice. The gradual privatization of the health service, the care plans within the England and all this stuff. We're gonna, unless independence is achieved, I don't know how we can simply just go on mitigating the problem.
Yeah, and it's kind of that survival of the fittest thing you were suggesting again, that people who are poor through their own choice, through their own moral failure, through not working hard enough, whatever. It never occurs to Boris Johnson that he's well off because his parents were well off, and they're well off because their parents were well off, and their parents were well off because their parents were well off. Whereas there's generations of poverty here in Glasgow and throughout Britain because people have been hit over and over again by government decisions that make it harder and harder for them to dig their way out of poverty.
They do say that the silver spoon doesn't actually, it gets passed from child to child, and it doesn't actually leave the house. So take from that what you want. I want to point out the bullet points that Alison Thewlis was asking for, and I know, Effie knows, Alison Thewlis knows, they are never going to agree to that.
Of course not.
Never going to agree to that. There is not one of those points that the Tory government could even conceivably think about agreeing to. They're all very reasonable points, and Scotland has been arguing for it for the last, I would suggest, 20 years. 25 years even. But Effie's quite right. We're never going to be able to do it unless we're independent. And unfortunately, where I do hate to disagree, we're going to be constantly on mitigation issues, constantly. And as long as we are in that, then people who are not on board with independence will say, right, well, you're doing it now, so why change it? And these people can't see the wood for the trees.
Well, that's the thing.
Sometimes I actually feel that the Scottish Government should stop mitigating it.
And say, well, there's a political argument for that.
But you know what, Chris, is the problem is you're talking about real lives, as you very well know. You're talking about children. I had a teacher the other day confide me that she knows of a little girl who goes home and has ketchup diluted in warm water for dinner. Now, we had a few tears about this, but that is something that will stay with me for probably the rest of my life. We're talking about a 6-year-old child she was talking to me about. Now, this £10 payment, as you said, they'll never agree to this. This is nothing to them. They can very easily implement it. However, they are choosing not to. And it's because it's much easier to control people if you keep them in poverty. And it's much easier to also control other things like disenfranchisement. So these people are less likely to go and vote because they are totally desperate. So you are actually controlling not just the economics, but also the ideology and who's going to be elected, to government for next term. So it's a big one.
We often say that poverty is a political choice; it doesn't need to exist. But on a related note, the SNP's deputy Westminster leader has warned that the UK government cannot ignore the elephant in the room as it sets out its budget, warning that its Brexit plans will leave families poorer and worse off. Ahead of the budget in Westminster this week, Kirsty Blackman MP criticised the UK government for pushing ahead with its race-to-the-bottom trade deal, which will hit the economy, cost thousands of jobs and harm people's livelihoods, while turning a blind eye to the impact a decade of Tory austerity has already had on families across the UK. Kirsty Blackman, the SNP's Deputy Westminster leader, said, as the UK government prepares to set out its budget, it cannot ignore the elephant in the room. The Tories' reckless Brexit plans threaten to damage the economy, cost thousands of jobs and harm people's livelihoods. Yet the UK government is ploughing on regardless. Rather than reversing a decade of devastating austerity, the Tories are instead turning a blind eye and writing a blank cheque for their own narrow self-interest by pursuing a policy of economic and social self-harm and race-to-the-bottom trade deal. That will push families and individuals into further hardship, leaving us all poorer and worse off. And Chris, again, this is one of these cases where the government is pursuing ideology and their political obsessions rather than doing what's right for the country. What is clearly, by any analysis, including their own, we're doing what's right for the country. What's going on in their minds?
What's going on in their minds? They are like stubborn mules. They don't want to quiver the traditional stiff upper lip. They've set out their manifesto and they're going to stick to it. And it doesn't suit whatever Cummings' big plan is. Not that I said Cummings because Boris just hasn't got a bloody plan. Whatever his plan is, he will not deviate from that, and anyone who is seen to be deviating from that will be given short shrift. Now, it's interesting today that for the first time since Feffell's takeover, that there were 38 Tory MPs that rebelled against the government on the Huawei debate.
Oh yeah.
However, it did pass the actual bill, unfortunately, but they're starting to.
There is at least some sign of rebellion. Yes.
You know, and it'd be interesting to see actually who was in that.
Yeah.
I caught a bit of the chat, and I believe David Davis might be in there.
It's not impossible.
So you know there are dissenting voices because what it was at the tail end of the last election, it was everyone was signed up. They had to go into Boris's office, sign on the dotted line, swear allegiance to the flag. I know that sounds a bit Trumpian, but that's basically what it was.
What was done. Yeah.
But now there's a couple of dissenting voices in the room, you know, which could be interesting in, you know, the debates that are coming up.
Yeah, and Effie, I mean, like I said, even the National Audit Office said the UK government has spent over £4 billion so far on EU departure planning, and the economy has already suffered £130 billion of damage.
That's the tip of the iceberg, you know, and that's us still in the EU, right? So Brexit has not actually happened yet. This is more money than the United Kingdom has paid in EU membership since 1974. I mean, these are staggering and shocking amounts of money. And obviously there will be tokenism in that budget. You know, there was talk about, you know, supporting the North and plowing money into the north of England and all this stuff. I do not believe for 1 second that the Tory government is ever going to support the north of England. They have contributed, they are actually the executors of that place. They've contributed to its demise in as much as they could. But as you know, elephant is in the room is a brilliant phrase. If this is exactly what it is, this is a Brexit budget.
Yeah.
I find it quite difficult. I get so angry, and I could burst an artery. I'm not going to do it live on television.
Please don't.
But you know, it makes me so angry that there will be people who will be watching this. Hopefully none of the people watching this right now, but there will be people out there, especially within England, who will subscribe still to the Boris dialect, and who will say, yeah, that's right. Think about what happened to Javid. I mean, he was literally got rid of the minute he disagreed with them. I think he was told to get rid of his team
Yeah.
within, number 11.
Yeah.
And he said no, and they told him where to go. This is what we're having to deal with, and this is going to go on. Hopefully there will be enough dissent, but he's got an 80 majority. I mean,
Yeah. Well, there's other pressures on the Chancellor as he prepares to make his budget this week. In the face of the coronavirus outbreak, the Chancellor of the Exchequer must announce measures to support private tenants and those in precarious work when he outlines his budget to Parliament tomorrow, said Scottish Green co-leader Patrick Harvey. People who are symptomatic and have travelled to affected regions such as Italy, where 463 people are thought to have died from the virus, have been advised to self-isolate. And Mr. Harvey has raised concerns that this will potentially hit people in precarious employment, such as those on 0 hours contracts, the hardest. The Irish government has recently announced a €2.4 billion initiative to increase sick pay, while the Italian government has set out how it will suspend mortgage payments to support those impacted by the lockdown. RBS has today announced that it will waive some mortgage payments for homeowners affected by coronavirus. Patrick Harvey MSP said, the Chancellor must use his budget to deliver support to those for whom isolating will cause the greatest hardship. For those on 0 hours contracts and many who are ostensibly self-employed, taking the decision to self-isolate in the face of this virus could potentially plunge them into hardship. Measures to reassure those who feel conflicted about isolating that they will be supported financially to do so could have a huge impact in halting or at least slowing the spread of coronavirus. We have already seen several measures implemented across Europe, with Ireland improving sick pay provision and Italy suspending mortgage payments. It's not just in Europe that this has happened. Japan announced recently that they're paying people £80 a day to stay at home and look after their kids.
That's right.
We've seen as well in the US. I mean, we talked a lot about Andrew Yang during the presidential campaign while he was in it, campaigning for universal basic income, and now all the economists are on American TV saying maybe Andrew Yang had it right. Maybe a universal basic income would let people stay at home rather than force themselves into work because they can't afford not to.
Well, you talk about Norway. Isn't that where a universal basic income is actually enforced?
No.
Is it, where is it? Is it somewhere in Scandinavia?
They trialled it in Finland.
It's Finland, that's right. It's
Finland,
Finland. I do apologise. And you're talking about levels of well-being unheard of within the United Kingdom. I mean, they're up there. Sick pay in the UK at the moment, I think, stands at £95 a week. And that's 100 and whatever it is per fortnight. I think in Germany it's 3 times that. So something needs to, and Switzerland and Italy are comparable, as is France, I believe. Now something needs to happen, and it needs to happen today, because people will go to work if it's a choice between feeding your child and potentially getting that virus and you perceiving yourself as fairly strong. You're going to go in because you need that money.
Yeah.
They need to act. But again, I'm a little bit worried about number 10 at the moment and where this is leading.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen them, Chris. They changed the rules on sick pay so that you are getting it from day one rather than having this wait. But as Effie says, it's never enough to sustain somebody.
Well, no, it's
and it doesn't even apply to people who are kind of nominally self-employed, like Uber drivers, for example.
Yeah. Well, take the one instance of them saying, sorry, I touched my face there, I do apologise. The one instance where the UK government were suggesting that they were wanting retired medical workers to go back to work. Now, just say for argument's sake that does happen. How much is that going to cost compared to paying someone not to go to work as a delivery driver?
Yeah.
We all, if they're talking about the country making sacrifices and all the rest of it,
why can't we just spend
a wee bit more
to prevent people getting into that situation?
And if you have to wait 3 days for your Ocado delivery, so be it.
Yeah.
We have to stop this namby-pamby approach. I personally believe this. Britain will stand up and in the face of adversity and absolute mince.
That's the people who've never actually known adversity who say that.
Well, but I mean, a curious question I would like to ask is, if someone self-isolates and that person has 24-hour social care. How does that person self-isolate?
Yeah.
They cannot self-isolate.
Yeah.
You know, so literally, what are the UK government proposals are? By all means, go out and do their shopping, but leave it at the door.
Yeah.
You know, and play chapdoor run. There's the shopping. Cheerio.
Yeah.
It doesn't work. So there has to be a feasibility study for everybody that's actually affected by this. And when you think of the ramifications, as I say, for someone who has got 24-hour social care,
Yeah.
the ramifications are wide-ranging.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, prevention is always better than cure, but it's sometimes difficult to persuade governments to spend that money on the prevention, and then we end up all paying for the cure. But anyway, the trial of former First Minister Alex Salmond on charges of attempted rape and sexual harassment continued today at the High Court in Edinburgh. Today saw the second day of testimony from woman H, who alleges that Salmond attempted to rape her after a dinner at Bute House in June of 2014. Cross-examination began today with defence lawyer Sheila McCall QC suggesting that the First Minister's diary showed that woman H was not even present at the dinner in question. Woman H said that such dinners would often go off-piste and numerous guests would arrive without being listed in the diary, and that caterers would describe them as loaves and fishes dinners because they would have to make a fixed amount of food feed many more people than expected. The trial, which is expected to last up to 4 weeks, continues, and we are not going to discuss this. It is an ongoing trial. There are restrictions on how much we can say about any of it, so we will just move on to our next story now. We're in the United States. Joe Biden hopes to take a big step towards the Democratic presidential nomination this evening when 6 states cast votes, while Bernie Sanders aims for an upset win in Michigan that would keep his White House hopes alive. Biden, who claimed the position of Democratic frontrunner with a sweeping series of wins last week in Super Tuesday nominating contests, could build a formidable lead in the race to pick a challenger for President Donald Trump with another round of victories. The biggest showdown between Biden and Sanders is expected in Michigan, a blue-collar battleground state where Sanders sprang a stunning upset in 2016 over Hillary Clinton that ensured a long nomination fight, something Biden hopes to avoid this time. With 125 delegates, Michigan is the largest prize of the 6 states voting today, when a total of 352 delegates to July's Democratic National Convention will be up for grabs. Missouri, Mississippi, Washington, North Dakota and Idaho also hold primaries today. And Chris, I know you're a big fan of Democratic Socialist Bernie Sanders, and maybe not so much of the centrist Biden. What's your hope for today?
I'm really hoping that Michigan embraces socialism, and it's not a state known for socialism, I don't think, but it is. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it is a production state.
It's kind of become a post-industrial state. It used to be a heavy industrial state and has lost a lot of industry recently.
So I'm really hoping that the people of Michigan State want to try and return to those sort of like Labour socialist values, and it could well. I don't think it will catapult them. Because there are, as you've alluded to there, another 6 states that are going to be voting shortly as well. So it'd be interesting to see how he's sort of like tipping out on those states as well. But
because winning a state doesn't. It's not a winner takes all. It's a proportional thing. So, so both will take some delegates from each state.
But you know, my own personal interest, obviously, in anybody who's standing on a socialist ticket, is to see them being well received by the voting public. Last time we were on, we were talking about Yanis Varoufakis, and I could listen to him all night. His take on democratic socialism is absolutely wonderful. And, I think Slow Joe has got enough to, just sneak in at the back there and, come out with a nice wee coup de grace.
Yeah.
But it's down to the actual states as to whether they buy into it or not.
Yeah. And Effie, one of the things that Bernie Sanders has built his career on, his campaign in 2016 and his campaign now, has been universal health care. And of course, with the coronavirus outbreak, people are now, again, starting to look at that in a different way, starting to realise that when you get quarantined and it costs you thousands of pounds to be kept in hospital against your will,
and you get the bill that you're
then
not.
Then you get a bill for it. People are starting to realise that maybe universal healthcare might be necessary.
Yes. That's the hope, and I do hope and pray that that's the way they go. It's actually intriguing just watching the trajectory of American politics over the last maybe 10 years and how it's gone from, a black man who is literally, you could describe him as a man of the people, a man who tried his best, obviously, within the restrictions of office, and you're not going to go in and completely change an imperialist power as the United States in 5 or 10 years or in 20. But, there you have Obama, and then you've got Donald Trump. Now this is a fascinating thing that's been happening, and obviously I follow it. I'm not an expert in American politics, but I do follow. I've got a little bit of a doubt as to whether even if the majority of the American public espouse these ideals and believe that X or Y is needed, or that time has come for America to deliver universal health care, which they call themselves civilized, any civilized nation takes this as a given. There is an issue here as to whether the people who actually take themselves to the voting booths, the people who are enfranchised and not people who are deliberately disenfranchised, will also in their majority espouse that message. So it's about so the American public is one thing. You've got about 400 million of them, but you've got a different set of people, which is the voters, and then you've got the college, the electoral colleges. It's a very complex system, and there's always a concern about the people who actually vote. What do they think, and is that the majority of Americans? I have doubt as to whether that actually,
Yeah. We will obviously have some report on that tomorrow, but in the meantime, we move to Turkey and Greece, where President Tayyip Erdogan said today he would not stop migrants trying to cross Turkey's border into Greece, despite EU pressure to do so, but also announced a summit next week in Istanbul with European leaders to seek a solution to the crisis. Tens of thousands of migrants have been trying to get into Greece since Turkey said on February 28th that it would no longer keep them on its territory as part of a 2016 deal with Brussels in return for EU aid for the refugees. Greece has sent troops to the border area and used tear gas and water cannon against the migrants, but the pressure has continued. Greece said it stopped 963 illegal migrants in the 24 hours to 6 a.m. this morning and arrested 52. Erdogan, speaking to reporters on his plane back to Turkey after discussing the crisis on Monday in Brussels with top EU officials, repeated his call on Greece to change tack. "We are not thinking of closing these gates. Our proposal to Greece is to open the gates. These people won't stay in Greece. Let them cross from Greece into other European countries," he said, calling for a just, humane sharing of the burden. His comments will revive memories of the 2015 and 16 migrant crisis, when more than 1 million people, mostly fleeing war and poverty in the Middle East and Asia, and especially in Syria, reached the EU via Turkey and Greece. In several countries, this became fodder for the growth of the far-right political parties. And Effie, this is something we've been talking about for a couple of weeks now. It does seem now, though, that the EU is ready to talk. There's reports that a lot of the money that they promised to Turkey just wasn't delivered, which really is a problem when it comes to this kind of deal.
Of course. What can you say? We're not talking about millions of people here. Clearly, I think Erdogan is using this as political leverage. It's his style open the gates. Open the gates. Let these people come in. You know, I am very much, and also you know, my work within the UNESCO chair and all this stuff. I'm never going to be one for saying, right, trying and contain these people or treat these people as simply numbers or as economical burdens. Very few people will try and displace themselves or take themselves or put your child in a boat simply to receive an economic benefit, which is very, very minimal, and they know that it is not going to be forthcoming easily. So this is a humanitarian crisis, and Europe really does have to act. I know there's a lot of dissent within Greece for the police tactics at the moment and what's been happening. I know there's a lot of resistance. People don't like seeing what's been happening. So hopefully that will ease the burden a little bit. I'm also hoping that Bulgaria try and ease that pressure through the borders into Bulgaria, so that the people can reach safety. That's all I have to say. It's a tragedy. We're not talking about millions of people. We're talking about a few thousand people. They need to get to safety.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not entirely about just the migrants. I mean, Turkey has a long-standing conflict with Greece, kind of not a war, but a kind of cold hostility, Turkey has said that they want to reopen negotiations on Turkey joining the EU as part of this deal. They want to kind of see more cooperation there. There's a lot of factors being involved, isn't there?
It's very, very warm words from Erdogan. He's when it comes to migrants, especially Syrian migrants, he's not got a very good track record, we must point out.
Well, human rights is not his forte.
No. But, same could be said of other state leaders. But the wider ramifications, I was interested to hear what you were saying about Greece, because, the refugee work that I do, which is predominantly in France and Belgium, and that is at the tail end, obviously, when they get to Greece, then it starts in that horrible ring of people trafficking. Absolutely. Where you've got unscrupulous people, basically saying, look, you can get into my boat if you give me X, Y, Z. And then set them out on these perilous journeys, and and I personally believe that Erdogan's maybe thinking, well, let them get there, because there's a good chance that if they get in the boats, they won't get to the other countries. Call me cynical if you like, but that would obviously fit in with his whole chat on human rights. But the point that I made earlier last week is that, Erdogan's quite right insofar as they won't just stay in Greece.
No, they won't.
Do you know what I mean?
The rest of the EU has to take on responsibility.
And the bigger question, which again, Effie is absolutely 100% correct, is that the EU really need to act on this.
There wasn't, to be in all fairness, I think Angela Merkel, there was an announcement yesterday about taking in 1,500 children.
She's Germany will take in some
Germany
children.
is a huge superpower. This is, and actually a lot of the Syrians that I've worked with, they're incredibly skilled people.
Yeah.
The ones that I've met a teacher, I've met a lady medical doctor. These are the people that, Germany need, and we all need them, especially now with the coronavirus challenge.
Absolutely.
You see what I mean? So it wouldn't harm us. Let them in, know.
Yeah, absolutely.
The SNP down at Westminster were challenging the government today to firm up on how many child migrants that they are actually going to let in, and that they still
they're not going to
confirm it.
Yeah, we've heard that Boris Johnson, even though we're no longer a member of the EU, may be a part of this summit in Istanbul. So we certainly would urge him to.
Well, he has some Turkish roots, hasn't he?
To be
granddad, I think, Turkish
possibly,
granddad.
to be as charitable as we can be. Not even charitable, it's justice. It's about playing our part as decent citizens of the world. But anyway, to someone who's somewhat less of a decent citizen of the world, Vladimir Putin has moved to cement his hold on power in Russia beyond the middle of the decade, backing a proposed constitutional amendment that would allow him to seek another 2 terms in the Kremlin. The Russian president is required by the constitution to step down in 2024 when his second sequential presidential term ends. That deadline has led to months of conjecture about how Putin would stay in power in Russia, or at least ensure a safe transition for himself. In the end, the puzzle was resolved in an afternoon in a series of choreographed political steps that took just over 3 hours and could see Putin stay on as president until 2036. The venture began in Parliament, where a member of Russia's ruling party proposed amending the constitution in a way that would reset Putin's term count back to 0. Putin then announced he would come to address the Parliament himself, prompting breathless coverage on state television about whether he would accept or turn down the proposal. He accepted it. In principle, this option would be possible, but on one condition: if the Constitutional Court gives an official ruling that such an amendment would not contradict the principles and main provisions of the Constitution, Putin said, addressing the proposal last during a half-hour speech. He also said the move would have to be approved by the public in a referendum next month. Now, for all he's saying this, it's not exactly a shock. It came from within his own party, actually from Valentina Tereshkova, the first female, the first woman in space, who proposed this. I mean, it came. We can say, I think, with some certainty, it came from Putin, or at least had his approval. But it wasn't her going off on one to try and save her political hero.
Would you contradict him if you were in the same room as him? Come on.
And then he's saying it'll have to go to a referendum when we know that elections in Russia are still far from free and fair.
Well, you know what? I think in this country we've been so used to criticizing other places in referenda happening. Let's just be, I think rigging in elections, it could be almost like a universal phenomenon, and it's, taking hold in different places. But Russia is very well known for this. I think obviously he was returned last time when maybe 85% of the vote or something like that, which I think is a little bit removed from possibly what the majority of Russian citizens may be thinking right now. But I think the word choreographed is just right. This whole thing was he's not going to let go. He's not going to let go. He has built a huge, and again, this comes back to ideology. I think I may have mentioned this before. A Yale historian, a man called Timothy Snyder, has written an amazing book called The Road to Unfreedom. Now, Timothy went to Ukraine and Hungary and Poland and stayed there for about 5 years doing research on all of these areas. And he produced, I think, a 400-page study on what's been going on pretty much since the death of Boris Yeltsin. Mm-hmm. And this has been, the word is brilliant, a choreographed and preempted destiny that Putin designed for what he sees as the Russian Empire. Mm-hmm. And he sees it in the idea of Eurasia. That's another term that his administration have come up in the last 15 years. So when you hear people say, oh, I hate the EU, but I love Europe, this is very much under the umbrella of post-Soviet Russia. So let's create a new Europe of which we are part. But hey, let's make sure that citizens are not as free as they used to be. They don't get the education, they don't get the healthcare, they don't get any of that, but we'll have a hand in it. Putin is a very interesting personality, a very dangerous one as well. As I said before, if I was in the same room as him, I would not I would be very, very frightened. This is a man who is a KGB trained man. He's not going to let go. He feels in himself, in his health, he feels strong. He's got allies now within the British government, within France, within Austria, within Hungary. He's got considerable allies. The United States. This is the most amazing. I can't think of anything more surreal that could have happened in the last 5 years. But actually now, you've got someone like Donald Trump praising Putin online via Twitter. So he's strong right now, and unless something happens, unpredictable happens, he's there to stay.
Yeah. We do have to move on. We are running fairly short of time
Sorry,
tonight.
Chris, I've taken all. I've been.
It's fine.
Behave.
And we're back in Scotland as Audit Scotland welcomes the Scottish Parliament's nomination of Stephen Boyle to become the new Auditor General for Scotland. MSPs voted this evening on nominating Mr Boyle to be recommended to Her Majesty to be appointed the next Auditor General. Subject to the Queen's formal appointment, Mr Boyle will succeed the current Auditor General, Caroline Gardner, when her term finishes at the end of June. Mr Boyle is an Audit Director at Audit Scotland, leading its central government audit work, including the Scottish Government, the Scottish Parliamentary Corporate Body, and the European Agricultural Funds account. He is also the appointed auditor of the Scottish Police Authority, the Scottish Public Pension Agency, and Registers of Scotland. Ian Leach, the chair of Audit Scotland's board, said, "The Auditor General for Scotland is a crucial role in Scottish public life. We welcome the Parliament's nomination of the new Auditor General, and the board and staff at Audit Scotland will provide our full support through this transition to maintain effective scrutiny of public services." I don't know if you got very much to say about the Auditor General, Chris?
Not really. Apart from the fact that it is a very wide-ranging job, a very challenging job, and obviously they have to get the right person for it. And if the majority of MPs have voted
It was unanimous.
for
Nominated him
one
unanimously.
person to do that, then I would like to think that
He's the best man.
he is the best man for the job. But interesting that you said it was unanimous, because therefore that takes in, the unionist vote. And if it takes in the unionist vote and they've got confidence in them, then that should maybe
Well, hopefully,
stick in their craw.
be
When they're,
something positive when the Auditor General says something positive about what the Scottish Government's doing. Yeah.
yeah, but Jackson Carlow never will.
Anyway, back in the Scottish Parliament, and Stuart McMillan MSP led a members' debate in the Scottish Parliament this evening to highlight some of the issues people with visual impairments face when trying to access healthcare. Key findings from RNIB Scotland's latest report, Communication Failure, a review of the accessibility of health information for blind and partially sighted people, include patient confidentiality being breached and individuals being put at risk of missing appointments due to a lack of accessible documents. The Greenock and Inverclyde SNP MSP spoke at the launch of the report in Glasgow last month in his role as the convener of the cross-party group on visual impairment. And speaking in the debate, Mr McMillan said, "The Patient Rights Scotland Act and its accompanying Charter of Patient Rights and Responsibilities states that patients have the right to be given information about their care and treatment in a format or language that meets their needs. Unfortunately, this report suggests that this commitment is not always being met in Scotland. Protecting constituents' confidentiality is paramount for MSPs, so to hear that patient confidentiality is being breached due to individuals relying on carers, relatives or friends to read appointment letters on their behalf is concerning. Individuals are also at risk of missing appointments or treatments, potentially leading to unnecessary sight loss due to the lack of accessible documents." And Chris, this is obviously a concern if people are, missing out on other aspects of their healthcare or even their visual healthcare because they just can't read the letters. I mean, this goes beyond just getting letters in Braille. This is people being able to communicate in ways that suit them.
Yeah, I, to be honest with you, I was, I hate to say, I was horribly ignorant to the whole issues of a blind person's lack of involvement until I met my friend Colette Walker, who is 95% blind, and even branch things. When you're at branch and somebody was holding up a bit of paper and stuff like that, Colette was, that's fine for everybody else, but
Where's my copy?
Where's my copy? How can I read this? And that really got me thinking. So, I as a disability rights activist, I wholeheartedly welcome Stuart McMillan. I know personally, I've had many a conversation with him about disabled rights, and he is absolutely fantastic on this. as well as other disablement issues. So, you know, it's basically to highlight the fact that disabled people should have a parity of their peers.
Yeah.
But at the same token, respecting the fact that you know they're not two people; they're one person. You know, and I mean that as in you know, it's not the carer and the disabled person; it's the disabled person.
Yeah,
and if that person, although they're blind, but they can still understand exactly what is pertaining to their condition,
Absolutely.
then it should be presented in a way that they can actually read and understand that.
Yeah, now we do need to move on again. So according to latest figures, 9,317 affordable homes were delivered in 2019, an increase of more than 25% since 2016, helping to provide more people with a warm, safe place to call home. More than 9,300 affordable homes were provided in 2019, an increase of 25%. The number of completed homes for social rent increased by 16% compared to the previous year. Statistics also show that in the year to September 2019, more than 21,800 new build homes across all sectors were completed, including those for private sale and for social and affordable rent. The number of new build homes that were started in the same period increased by 24% to 24,873, the highest annual figure since 2007. And again, this is an ongoing issue. We have had housing and homelessness problems in Scotland for a long time. This has got to be welcome news, hasn't it?
Absolutely, and let me just augment this point. Fantastic news. Very much, again, the distancing between Scotland and England on this, where in England you're seeing an increase in the number of homeless people and not enough consideration to the rights of private renters or social housing. And you've got about, I think at the moment, about 120,000 children literally living homeless within England. So this is fantastic news. More of it, please. You know.
Yeah, absolutely. And our final story tonight, in a significant development for Scotland's screen sector, Screen Scotland today announced that First Stage Studios Limited, led by Oscar-nominated and BAFTA-winning film and television producer Bob Last and actor and director Jason Connery, has been appointed to run a large-scale film and TV studio space in Edinburgh's Port of Leith. First Stage Studios Limited, that's hard to say quickly, will work to create an internationally competitive production facility. This is a major step forward in Scotland's ability to take advantage of the global boom in high-end TV and film production. The studio space in Edinburgh has already hosted major international productions, including Marvel's Avengers: Infinity War. Its scale complements the range of studio facilities and flexible build spaces available across the country. It will benefit both domestic filmmaking and Scotland's ability to attract high-value international productions that work with the local sector. Fiona Hislop, the Cabinet Secretary for Economy, Fair Work and Culture, said, "This announcement represents a great step forward in Scotland's ambition to drive growth across all aspects of the film and TV sector. Having a studio of this scale will provide a home in Scotland for film and high-end TV productions, generate significant revenue for Scotland's wider economy, and support sustainable careers across the film and TV industry, from writers, producers and directors to those working in craft and technical areas." And, you know, you have a background in the arts, Effie. What do you make of this announcement?
Well, you know what? This is great news. Investment of this scale, fabulous. Just one small comment, as not to in any way, you know, downplay this. This is of big significance, but got to be a bit careful here because it's delicate. Let's just make sure that the the size of this, because you're talking about international productions, huge big production companies who are dealing in, some of them, billions of dollars. And it's very welcome and it's brilliant, but sometimes what that does is it has the potential to stifle local creativity.
Yeah.
So we've got to be able to cater for that. If you don't support that, and it starts with very, very small projects, projects that may not find their way into these studios. These studios, it's their duty to make it possible for the beginners and the local creators and the makers, the filmmakers, to have access to these facilities. It shouldn't just be about the huge, big productions, although obviously you need them. I am now in the process of making a film supported by Creative Scotland, and I very much know the process of trying to persuade a large funding body to fund something small. So let's hope that they can cater for both.
Yeah, and Chris, I mean, Jason Connery, son of Sean, of course, noted. He is a very successful actor and director himself. He's been teaching low-budget filmmaking for the last few years, which I thought was really interesting. What do you make of this?
It's welcome news, and I hope that it can go from strength to strength. I am a bit worried, again, as Effie was saying, because remember, we've got already established Warren Park Studios, where they filmed the Outlander series. So let's hope that doesn't get sort of like dragged into the sort of like it gets swallowed up.
That's the thing.
By the billions of dollars, as you're saying. But I think it obviously, with the amount of films that are currently being made in Scotland at this moment in time, it was only last month that Batman was getting filmed on the streets of
Glasgow University, Outlaw King happened right there on the balcony.
And Dunkirk was here, recently.
Yeah. So what Fiona Hislop is saying is absolutely correct. Is that it's another area that Scotland can thrive on.
Oh, totally.
And look to it to help our economy, because if we are forced to stay on the same trajectory as what we are, God knows we'll need something to actually help Scotland's economy.
And on that note, we do come to the end of the show a wee bit later than planned, but there was a lot to talk about today. And speaking of supporting film and television in Scotland, Broadcasting Scotland, as you know, runs on a very small budget from a very small studio here in Glasgow, where we don't have anything like the budget of what you're seeing in the Port of Leith announced today. If you're able to support us, to help us just make a wee bit more money, have a wee bit more that we can do here at Broadcasting Scotland, please do. Go to broadcastingscotland.scot/register. Sign up as a supporter. Your £5 a month can make a huge difference to the quantity, quality, and the type of programmes we can produce here. We're not going to be producing anything quite like Avengers Infinity War here, but there's a lot that we could do if we just had a wee bit more money to play with. There's a lot of things we'd love to do. Right now, one of our big issues is getting a satellite dish so that we're able to broadcast from anywhere in the country. There are remote areas where the 4G signal that we use now and the 5G signal that we've just got access to aren't available. So that's one of the big things we want to be able to do, so that we can reach every part of Scotland with our outside broadcast unit. If you're not able to support us financially, please don't feel bad about it. Being a supporter, being a viewer is just as important, and the shows will always be free to view online. But you can help us by following us on Twitter at Broadcast Scot. You can find us on Facebook as well, just search for Broadcasting Scotland. And you can help us in the biggest way possible by letting other people know about Broadcasting Scotland. Tell the people what you get out of these shows, why you enjoy watching them. Share them around, tell them if there's a story that interested you, somebody said something on the show that excited you. Let your friends know, share it around on social media, tell them why you support it, because that's the only way we can build the kind of independent media that Scotland deserves. And finally, if you want to get involved in Broadcasting Scotland, that's also a huge thing. There may not be, as Effie said, it may not be easy for everybody to get access to the big studios, but there's access here for literally anybody who wants to help out. There's jobs behind the camera as journalists, operating cameras, working in the control room, and there's jobs on screen as well. As I've said, I'm going off for surgery on Thursday, so I'll be out here for a couple of weeks. And we're always needing more people to cover for when the likes of me and Gordon are sick or unable to appear for other reasons, when maybe we need to take a holiday. So if you're interested in that at all, or you know somebody who is, please let them know. We have a very professional setup here in a lot of ways. The quality of the equipment that we're using is top notch, but the ability that we have to do more with it depends on money, and it depends on the people that we have to help us. So if you can help with any of those things, please do. But that is all for tonight. I'll be back again tomorrow at 7 with another Scotland at 7. But until then, thanks very much to Effie Samara and Chris McCusker for joining us. It is always a great pleasure to talk to you. And to those of you at home, have a great evening.